Good day, everyone. ASAE Business Services is pleased to present today's webinar entitled The Value of Integration. Our speaker for today's presentation is Ron McGrath. My name is Jeff Baker, and I will be your moderator for today's seminar. Today's presentation will last approximately 30 minutes and include a specific question and answer period at the end of the session. You may enter a question one of two ways. You can ask a question via the web conference system by simply typing it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keypad. You may also tweet your questions using hashtag ASAEwebinar. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. If you have any technical questions during the event, please email support@highroadsolution.com. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during the live program. Today's webinar is part of a lunch learning series on email marketing brought to you by ASAE Business Services. Each 30-minute bi-monthly webinar educates attendees on strategies and tactics to quickly boost email marketing performance for any organization. Ron McGrath is one of the original founders and now Chief Technology Officer at HighRoad Solution. HighRoad specializes in bringing integrated messaging solutions, including email, mobile, and webinar, to the association nonprofit market. Ron has over 18 years developing and providing cutting-edge technology solutions to various markets, including the association nonprofit space. Ron is a serial entrepreneur and a dynamic presenter, speaking at conferences on email best practices, and is known to have a talent for making complex technologies accessible and compelling. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ron McGrath.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, and I want to welcome everyone to our session today on the value of integration. We appreciate your time. So there's a couple different items I'm going to touch on in today's content. First, we're going to start with what we're calling an integration ecosystem and defining what exactly that is. And then we'll build, again, some compelling reasons of why you want to take the time and spend the energy developing this ecosystem, where to start, and some applied use cases on how this can be used in an effective manner to increase the member experience for your audience. So what is an integration ecosystem? Each one of you in different organizations, you're leveraging different technology platforms, the AMS, your member portal, your website, email, survey, webinars, and direct mail to help serve and communicate with your members. One of the things about that is there really are no best-of-breed applications. There's no one application that can do it all well. And so there's really what you want to look at. There are only best-of-breed solutions. And so the key thing here is when one particular application or piece of software or individual, matter of fact, tries to do too much or what happens is they end up not doing any one thing extremely well or effectively. And so one of the things that you want to think about is making sure that you choose kind of the best solutions in those particular verticals in terms of technology. And so you want to pick from the different solutions out there and basically pick what works best for what you're trying to accomplish, the task at hand. And then integration is the glue that binds these technology platforms together. Because in the end, what you want is you want your technology to work together like a well-rehearsed symphony, producing one sound, a great member experience. So again, these technology solutions are going to work together to provide the actual customer experience, member experience for your audience, and it's important that these solutions work well together in terms of in an integrated manner. So why create an integration ecosystem? You really want your technology to transcend those different silos they sit in and, again, deliver an overall experience. And so you don't want your members thinking about the actual technology platform itself. You want them focusing on the experience. Same thing with your staff. You want them being able to think about the overall experience, not being limited from the fact that the different pieces of technology, they don't work well together. In addition, obviously you're going to generate better member satisfaction. You're going to save a tremendous amount of staff time. Your organization is going to save money in the long term. You're going to grow the bottom line. So where do we start? So one of the most important decisions you're going to make is choosing your particular AMS. It's really kind of the linchpin and the hub that all the other technology platforms are built around. Email is interesting because really email is the delivery system for many of the other technology platforms. So when it comes to surveying your membership, you have to deliver that survey in some way. You're sending that out via email. When you want someone to attend a webinar, the link to actually connect into the webinar is sent via email. A lot of website traffic is actually generated from emails hitting the inbox and people clicking through those emails. And then with social platforms, it's not one of those things when you build it that they're just going to automatically come. You actually have to market it and drive people to it. So again, email is an effective delivery system in terms of driving people to these other technology platforms. One of the other things you want to think about is when you're working with partners, and I use the word partners versus vendors, is you really want to choose vendors that partner with your organization. You want to make sure that they want to deliver a total solution for you. And make sure that integration is part of their culture so that you know out the gate that they work very well with other partners when it comes to delivering a total solution. Another thing that's important, obviously, is that they understand your business as an association nonprofit. And really, one of the main tenets is that they understand your AMS, because a lot of the integration happens around the AMS layer. So let's talk about some applied use cases in terms of how to leverage when you've implemented this integration ecosystem and how to take most advantage of it. And what I've done here for each one of these use cases is put underneath the different technology platforms that are playing well together to deliver the overall member experience. And so in this case, when we talk about delivering highly personalized newsletters, we have the AMS, the email platform, and the CMS platform all working together to do that. So traditionally, when organizations send out newsletters, a lot of organizations to this very day are still sending out very generalized newsletter to their membership, or the majority of the membership that's actually opted in to receive the newsletter. And so that's obviously the most simple way that you can deliver newsletters. And the performance on those are going to be, good if you have, for example, good design, if you're doing kind of what we call the 60-40 rule in terms of how much imagery you have and those kinds of things. But what you'll see with some organizations as they're thinking more about their email marketing strategy is they're trying to leverage more of the segmentation from the AMS. So there's a lot of demographic information in the AMS, and so let's use that segmentation from the AMS through this integration ecosystem to send out more targeted emails, or what we call dynamic emails. And so if you're sending out a newsletter to your membership and it's 10,000 or 9,000 members, maybe you segment it into 3 different groups, 3,000 apiece, that get different lead stories based on the fact that they've expressed to you that, okay, I prefer to receive information around leadership, or, for example, I want to receive information around social when it comes to technology. And so this is one way to do it. You will get better performance if you're leveraging this kind of integration between the AMS and the email platform. But what you'll see in the marketing space is a move to go away from just segmentation, which is basically generalizing your audience and putting them into buckets, and really trying to speak at the individual member level. So each individual member can express to you what their communication preferences are, and you're basically honoring that and delivering that information to them. So this is an example of that. This particular newsletter, every individual member that's receiving it gets a very customized newsletter based on what their communication preferences are. The only way to deliver this kind of customization or personalization is through an integration ecosystem. You can't send this out in a manual way. And so basically, kind of from a high level, when I say AMS, I'm really talking about both the back office and the customer-facing portion of the member portal. So via the member portal, each individual member every week the email platform automatically pulls a list from the AMS of who should receive this newsletter. So no one's actually logging in. Okay, we're on the diagram. So the overall diagram is showing kind of from a high level exactly what's going on, which is basically the members interacting with the member portal. The member portal is capturing this information, the metadata in terms of what the individual's interests are back in the AMS. And the email platform is basically pulling that data, the metadata from the AMS, and using that to figure out which stories it needs to grab from the CMS and delivering, in the end, a highly customized newsletter. So what are the advantages of this? And I'm actually back in, Jeff. So when you look at and you compare the open rates between this highly personalized newsletter and your typical newsletters, a typical newsletter that's performing well is getting somewhere north of a 20% open rate, 20, 21, 22%. This particular newsletter, because it is so customized at the individual member level, is actually experiencing over a 40% open rate. So again, taking the time to make these technology platforms work well together and sending out really a highly personalized newsletter, in the end, is definitely encouraging the member to get more engaged in the email communications because the member experience is so customized. And so this is, again, the value of creating an integration ecosystem. Another thing to think about, since we're on it and we're talking about communication preferences, is there are a lot of different on-ramps or portals or ways that your membership can express what their communication preferences are. So, everyone always kind of thinks about the member portal, but there are other technology platforms that you're leveraging that you want to make sure all talk to the same data structures in the AMS. And what do I mean by that is, obviously if I receive an email, I can click on the footer in the email and it'll take me to kind of a preference center and allow me to change my communication preferences. The key thing here is, regardless of the technology platform that you're using, you want to make it easy for the member to update their communication preferences. So if they're in the social platform, you don't want them to have to leave that experience to tell you more specifically about what they want. Same thing as if they're in the member portal or if they receive an email from you. The key here is each one of those technology platforms, the member portal, email, CMS, social platforms, they should read and write the preferences to the AMS, right? So they're all sharing and storing information in the same data structure. So it really doesn't matter which technology platform the member is leveraging or the staff is leveraging, they all talk to the same AMS. So again, from a member portal perspective, I always have to authenticate, and I can get into my profile and change what my communication preferences are. The difference here with email is when someone receives an email, for that email to be CAN spam compliant, you can't require someone to authenticate into a system. And so an email preference center is a standalone application in an integrated ecosystem, basically is reading the current email preferences from the AMS and allowing the member to change them. That's also why you want to limit it just to communication preferences. You don't want to have them being able to change contact info because, again, you can't authenticate them into such a page. But the key thing here is making sure that all those technology platforms are reading and writing the communication preferences back into the AMS. Another big thing that a lot of organizations are leveraging is survey. So again, we're talking about different ways to communicate with your membership and making these all work well together. And so a big piece about surveying your membership is a lot of organizations right now are doing this in a standalone manner, but there's a huge benefit in terms of making sure that these platforms are working well together. And so again, in this case, we're looking at bringing the AMS, the survey tool, and the email platform together so that they're working in this integration ecosystem together. So the idea here is, again, a survey has to be delivered to the member, and that's done through the email platform. Again, the email platform is going to get its list for delivery from the AMS through integration, right? So this is a piece that should be automated. The survey platform captures the following information and data to the AMS and the email platform, and this is one of the key pieces to integration here, is the idea is when a member completes the survey, that gets written back to the AMS as some kind of customer activity or a contact log. Members that have started the survey and then basically, or who have not started the survey, and members that have started the survey and have not completed it. You also want to capture that back in the email platform, because a lot of times there are going to be subsequent emails you want to send out based on what actions occurred or did not occur. And so again, capturing that information back in the AMS and the email platform is really important. In addition to capturing kind of what we call the survey analytics to the AMS, you also can capture the survey responses themselves. And getting that information back in the AMS, I'm really big on getting everything back in the AMS, because you want to own your own data and analytics. If you move between vendors, you want to be able to do that without having data stuck in that vendor's platform. And so again, getting all that kind of analytics information, be it email or survey or social, back in the AMS is really critical. Now that this information is actually in the email platform, most email platforms have some form of lifecycle messaging or automated email campaigns that can be set up in advance to be triggered based on, again, actions or inaction in terms of how they interacted with the survey. So based on whether someone completed the survey or not, you may have a different call to action in that message that goes out, different tone, those kinds of things. So getting those three systems to work well together, you can deliver a much, much better member experience, and again, actually get people to more likely complete surveys. Webinar integration is very interesting because it actually kind of brings everything together, and this is the piece that we kind of talked about earlier, is basically allowing your technology to transcend the actual platforms themselves. Because if you want to deliver webinars in an effective manner, you really got to get a lot of different systems to play well together. The AMS, obviously the webinar tool itself, email, and survey. So I want to talk a little bit about how VSCPA does this right now. It's very, very interesting. So first of all, they have a custom branded front end that allows them to come into the webinar tool that we're actually using today. So it's completely branded for VSCPA. First of all, it's actually using SSO to use the same credentials the member would use to log into the member portal. And so they only have to know one set of credentials, and they're able to authenticate into any particular webinar that VSCPA is conducting. The other piece is we're pulling the specific webinar or event name from the AMS through the integration. And so it's always the same portal screen, but what you see up there, the 21st Annual Professional Development Conference, that's pulled dynamically from the AMS. So the first thing that happens is when they put in their credentials, we use SSO to determine whether this is a valid credentials. In this case, it was not, so we're prompting the user. If the credentials are valid, the next thing we do is we determine whether this person's actually registered and paid for this actual webinar. And if they haven't, we inform them. And at this point, the registration would be too late if the webinar is about to occur. Once they've actually connected into the webinar, one of the important requirements for VSCPA is the fact that these webinars are for CPE credits. And so there's a couple things that we're logging back from the webinar into the AMS. We're logging the in time and the out time. And then they have some business rules that get kicked off that determine whether someone's going to get credit based on the time of the webinar and their in and out time. The other thing that's nice, too, is during the actual webinar, we've sprinkled some different poll questions that allows us to determine whether the individual's paying attention during the webinar, if they didn't just cut the webinar on and walk out the room. And so it's a combination of logging the in time, the out time, and the number of poll questions that were answered that determines whether someone is actually given CPE credits. The notifications themselves right now are sent from the website, but that's another piece that, again, could automatically be sent from the email platform, and just making all those things work well together. So you can kind of see from end to end, this integration ecosystem that we're starting to create for them has a lot of time savings for the staff so that they don't actually have to, before we put this in, they were doing this manually, trying to determine whether someone gets credits or not. So really effective way of taking advantage of integration between the different platforms. So in the end, one of the big pieces I've kind of been touching on multiple times is just talking about getting all this analytic information when people click and open emails, if people complete surveys, people actually attend webinars, written back to the AMS. And the reason is obviously, like I said, you want to own that data. If you move between technology platforms, you don't have to worry about that data sitting in a silo that you can't get to anymore. The other thing that's important, too, is a lot of the AMSs and organizations are starting to try to look at what we call total member engagement scoring. So basically, you can put weighted scales on each one of those interactions. And so, for example, someone attending a webinar may have a heavier score than someone opening an email versus someone actually attending a live event. And what you can do is by putting these weighted scores on all these interactions that you can have with a member, in the end you can calculate a total member engagement scoring and understand how involved each individual member is with your organization. And so this is kind of a big move in the AMS space, and so that's why it's really important to make sure your technology platforms, the peripheral platforms off the AMS, write all this analytical information back into the actual AMS itself. So that's in a nutshell some of the things I wanted to cover. It was more of a, again, we only have a certain amount of time. We will be doing breakout sessions on the specifics in some of these areas. But again, right now we're just going to open it up to questions. So Jeff?
Great, thank you, Ron. It is now the question and answer segment for this educational session. Your participation is important because this is an opportunity to learn from each other. So please do not be afraid to ask questions. Again, you can ask questions one of two ways, either via the web conference system by typing it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the screen and clicking the call out button or hitting enter on your keypad. You may also tweet your questions using the hashtag ASAE webinar. All right. First question here was wondering about any integration of accounting packages. Anything you have heard of or could suggest there?
Typically, the integration with the accounting packages or between the accounting package and the AMS, I personally don't have a lot of experience with that. I know internally here at HighRoad that we have a huge project going on with integrating our accounting package with some of our internal CRM. And so there's a huge amount of time savings you can have with that, but firsthand experience in terms of how associations would take advantage of that, I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Okay, thank you. We actually had a couple of people asking about an archive of this webinar. There will be an archive available of this webinar and the past lunch learning series. You can look for an email coming from ASAE in a few days that will have information on how to access any of the archives. Traditionally, when we do talk about integrations and things like this, this question will inevitably come up, talking about the cost involved with this. Is there an easy way to answer that one, Ron?
Well, we do here at HighRoad, and again, I like to do these presentations kind of platform agnostic, and so we don't really focus a lot on HighRoad per se, but we do have a lot of the stuff that I covered are actually part of a lot of our baseline integration, so we do have some flat fees for that. Definitely feel free to, and I'll have some of my contact information here, to reach out directly to me or my team, and we'd be happy to give you, HighRoad pricing on some items. Some of these other items, obviously, if the vendors you're working with haven't done them before, they'd be probably custom development projects, and so a lot of what I showed are integrations that we offer out of the box.
Great, thank you. Next question is wondering if the members ever compare email newsletters and note that they have different news items. So when using like the dynamic content, for instance.
Yeah, I haven't. That's a good question. I haven't had that happen. I haven't had that actually happen. The big piece would be is I don't know from a sending perspective or recipient perspective if the actual member of those particular newsletters I was showing actually really knows what's happening on the back end, right? From a member experience, they just know that they're getting content that they seem to be more interested in. But I don't really know if they actually realize what's going into delivering that content in that manner, which is always kind of a good thing, right? But when things really are working seamlessly and well, they almost look easy, right? So they don't see kind of the the wizard behind the curtain kind of situation. So yeah, I don't think so, but I can't say say exactly. I don't think members are comparing the content themselves with each other.
All right. There are a lot of questions coming in. We probably won't have time to get to all of them, but please feel free to keep submitting them. We will compile a list of the questions and answers to them, again, in that email that you'll be receiving in a few days. But the next one here, if you are not integrated now, what do you feel are some of the first steps? How do we get started?
I think the first step would be, it really kind of depends on where you're at. So let's say, for example, if you're not integrated and you're currently in the market and looking for AMSs and looking at different AMSs and technology platforms, I would have these conversations on the front end. Just to be completely frank, I mean, you know how it is with vendors. Before you've signed a contract, they want to have a lot of conversations with you, and they will promise you a lot of things. So I try to encourage organizations to have that conversation very early on. Now, if you already have an AMS, you've already have some of these technology platforms, I think one of the big things is kind of getting all stakeholders in one room to kind of talk about the big picture. And again, making sure that everyone's on board in terms of working together to deliver an overall solution. I think, what you want to make sure is your vendors are going beyond kind of like partnerships that are on paper to like real value, real synergy where, the systems are working well together. So starting with kind of a meeting where you have all the stakeholders in one room is a good starting point, and talking about at a high level what you want to accomplish, and then kind of drilling into the details. You always want to start with the overall business strategy and not the technology. When we do implementations, we're really initially just talking to the business users and having IT to listen in terms of what the business side wants to accomplish, and we let the business piece drive the actual technical requirements. So I think those are all good tips based on our implementations and experience I've had.
Great. I think we'll try and do two more here. What sort of processes can be automated with the integration?
I mean, anything you really can be integrated when it comes to integration. I mean, really the sky's the limit. It's just based on your imagination. I mean, right now, a lot of the AMS platforms, the bigger platforms, have very, very mature APIs. And so most of the data you can get in, get out, and get into the system. So at this point, it's really just making sure that, you're working with a team of people that can guide you and tell you what's possible. I think the biggest thing that we notice when we're doing implementations is you have to start with walking the organization and the customer through what's possible, because they don't know what to ask for, because they don't know what was possible in the past. But I mean, really the sky's the limit. Some of the things I showed today started out as custom integrations, customers just expressing to us, pain points they had, and we saw different ways to automate it. So, really the sky's the limit, and only limited by your imagination. Great.
And this last question comes from Mike. I think it is a good one to end on. There's been a lot of conversations about this at ASAE's recent annual convention and a number of the AMS users groups that we've been to. And Mike wants to know, have you seen any solutions that integrate the concept of total member engagement with digital badges or the gamification concepts, things like that?
That is a great question. I have not. But I think this total member engagement piece is new, and you're going to see more happen in that space. But I actually haven't seen that as of yet. But it doesn't mean that it's not something or a goal to strive for. But this total member engagement piece is big. I think people are going to be talking about it a lot over the next couple of years, because a lot of the different technology platforms are not currently writing the analytic information back to the AMS. So you're going to see more and more of that. And so I'm interested to see what people are talking about, 6 months from now. But I think that's going to be a big move.
All right, great. Did you want to do a quick wrap-up before we close things off?
Well, no, just want to thank everybody for their time. Apologize for the technical glitch, but I think we got through that pretty nicely. And again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. And thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
And thank you, everyone, for participation in today's webinar, The Value of Integration, brought to you by ASAE Business Services. A special thank you to our speaker, Ron McGrath. You will receive an evaluation survey via email, or You can click the post-event survey in the important information box in the top right-hand corner, and that will provide us some valuable feedback on today's event. If you have any additional questions or comments, please contact ASAE Business Services at endorsesolutions@asaecenter.org. Today's session was recorded. You will receive an email within the next few business days with a link to the webinar recording, as well as written answers to any of the questions we were unable to get to today. Today's webinar is copyrighted by ASAE Business Services, Inc., with all rights reserved. This concludes today's program. Thank you, and you may now disconnect.